What's up, guys? Polk here, and today we're going to be talking about something that I love very much, bluffing. Now, I think that the word bluffing, it makes people feel different ways. Some people feel like, oh, damn, bluffers like trying to steal pots that aren't theirs. Some people love bluffing too much, and they're bluffing all the time. Some people like to think they're bluffing, and they really don't that much. But here's the bottom line about bluffing. Bluffing is life in poker. Without bluffs, you can't win pots unless you have hands. And the tough thing in poker is making hands. Most hands miss most flops. So you can't simply only make decisions based around when you have good hands, or else you're going to get run over by your opponents. Now, the question is, how much bluffing should we do? And I've got a good general rule for you. If you wanted to just take one thing away from this video, it would be this. The earlier the street is, the more bluffing you should be doing. Preflop bluffing is the best kind of bluffing you can have, because even when you have a hand like a suited connector, you still have 30, 35, 40% equity against the range of hands your opponent can continue with. That means that because your bad hands have 40% equity or 35% equity, you can do a lot of bluffing relative to your good hands. As you get closer to the river, you have less and less equity against the range that continues against you, culminating in the river. If you're betting the river with a hand that has equity if you're called, you should not be betting, okay? On the river, you want to clearly know if you have a value bet or a bluff. If you can see him maybe folding a few better hands or maybe calling a couple worse, chances are you made a bad bet on the river. Now, on the river, you do want to take into account the pot odds that your opponent is getting. If you bet the full pot, let's say the pot's $100, and you bet $100 into it, your opponent is now getting 2-1 on their call. They're calling $100 to win your bet and the pot. So they get 2-1 there. That means you need to be bluffing 1 out of 3 times, or else your opponent can call whenever you bet, knowing that you're bluffing too much. You want to make your opponent indifferent between calling or folding, meaning they don't care if they call, you don't care if they call or they fold. Either way, you're going to be making profit with your range. So, how do we always try and figure this out? How are we always on top of our bluffs? Well, normally it involves some planning on earlier streets. Think about on flops. What hands am I going to bet the turn in the river? Think about on the flop if you check it back. What hands do I want to bluff with and what hands can I bet there? Anytime you're in a situation where you're not totally sure what hands you bluff with, you might want to take a moment and think about it. There are some pretty easy boards. Like let's say you bet on a flop like Queen Jack 2. Here you could have flush draws or straight draws like King 10 or 10 9, as well as, hands like backdoor flush draws or maybe even a hand like Ace 10. Those hands will make nice bluffs where they can improve to hands that can value bet. And additionally, when they brick, sometimes you'll bluff and sometimes you'll not. You really have the option either way. The point is, sometimes it's not as easy to decide what hands to bluff with. Let's say it's a flop like King 7-2. Now what do you bluff with? Well, you're going to have to get a little more ambitious. Maybe you pick some backdoor flush draws. Maybe you just pick an ace-high hand that doesn't have much showdown value. Either way, you should be trying to map all of these things out. Another place that people have been getting better lately but still have some problems are checking back the flop and then betting the turn. Think about what high card hands you would bet, what high card hands you would check, and what you would bet on the flop in order to know what hands you need to be bluffing with on the turn. The general rule there is that you can have a range of good hands to value bet. You also want to be picking some bluffs. Do you have some king highs that check back the flop? Maybe you have some total air that checked back the flop and now wants to bluff, like 7-6 suited on King 9-2. Now you have a chance to take down the pot, and you also could have a hand like 10s that want to bet the turn. So I guess my point would be, don't be afraid to lose your stack bluffing. Don't be afraid to put your opponent in those tough spots. Because if you want to become a great poker player, you can't be scared of that. And one of the biggest mistakes people make these days are not bluffing enough and thus not allowing themselves room to win a lot of chips. Look, bluffing is probably the worst if you're me. I'm probably on that list of bluffers if there's such a thing. But even I still bluff because I know it'll help me get paid on my good hands, and when they fold, I'm going to win the pot. So it's part of a good balanced strategy, and make sure you are working that into your game as well. If you want to learn more about bluffing, I'd strongly recommend checking out the Upswing Poker Lab. See you guys there.